And now, the second reason for Diamond Sutra being important is a little bit academic. We go to the academic. I like to go into detail when I talk about a sutra. I don't just read the words and tell you this is the word you know. I always give more information on surrounding the sutra so that you understand more. It's easy if I just take the sutra and just read that one line and say, oh, this is the word. Find a dictionary. Oh, this is a Subhuti, and here's the disciple of the Buddha, or this is the meaning of that particular word. No, you won't learn too much just by looking at the superficial meaning. You really have to know a little bit more. So I like to give you some academic. I like academic information. If you look at the bibliography of Prajna, as far as I can remember, there are 12 different translations of Prajna Sutras. 12 different translations from Sanskrit into Chinese. The reason why I tell you this, there are some scholars who suspect certain sutra to be forced. This could be created by later people. It was not spoken by the Buddha. But because of these 12 different translations in 12 different periods, dating from 1,800 years ago, the falsity is not justified. If it is forced, how can it be? In the 1,800 years, we got all translation of Prajna Paramita. So sometimes studying the academics of Prajna, you will know this is really what the Buddha talked about 2,600 years ago. Nothing forced about it. So that's why we want to get into the bibliography, the literature, academics of it. So that when one day a person could ask you, how do you know the sutra is true? How do you know that it's not created by people, by some scholars 1,000 years after the Buddha? Then you justify yourself, because there are academic researchers that dealt with the falsity or the authenticity of sutras. So that's why sometimes we cannot stay away from academics and just look at the philosophy of it. So, 12 different Chinese translations. And not many of these have been translated into English. Not many of these. And I tell you how many. One of those, I think, as far as I know, were translated into English. Because translation of sutras into English is just a matter of within the past 200 years. Long ago, they weren't even found in the English language. And of the 12 different translations, how come the Chinese have more translations? Because the Chinese started to learn 2,000 years ago, 2,100 years ago approximately. They traveled to India. They are adventurous. They travel the Silk Road, and they for 5 years, for a lot of sacrifice, of course, and they study in India. And the student monk who studied the longest is Xuanzang. He traveled. He took 3 years to travel and stay in India for 17 years. He learned all this. That's in the Tang Dynasty. That's about 1,100 years ago. And of course, there are monks earlier than that. Fa Xian, about 400 years earlier, so about 1,500 years ago. And he traveled with others for 5 years on the road, the Silk Road to India, and studied in India for 7 years. When he started his journey, he was 65, an old man. You see how courageous an old man crossed the Himalayas and crossed the desert, took all this adventure with 10 other monks, companion, crossed the Himalayas, and he traveled for 5 years. A few died in the desert. Only 2 safely arrived in India. One never wanted to return. I don't want to return. If I return, I'll be dead on the road. So if you want to go back, feel free. I'm going to die in India. But he went back. This old man at the age of more than 70 years old, 70, 75, 76, he traveled back, brought back all the sutras to China. Because he promised the Buddha before he started his journey that he wanted to bring back all the sutras. He promised. And at the age of, I don't know, approximately about 75, 74, after a few years of study, he traveled, and this time he didn't take the Silk Road. He traveled by boat. He was smart. He traveled by boat. And he got stranded a few times. He got robbed by pirates. He lost some of the sutras. And he got all this record in that book. You should read. It's translated by James, like I told you before, a record of his journey. That's very interesting. And that record of his journey was written 1,500 years ago about his own travel. So, let's talk about Xuanzang now, the monk who studied in India for 17 years, which he translated the most Prajna Sutras. One of the most voluminous is the Maha Prajna Sutra. And after he translated that one, he passed away. Overworked himself too much. He passed away immediately, half a year after the translation of Maha Prajna. And Maha Prajna in the Chinese language, Da Bore Jing Maha Prajna, contain 600 volumes. And he spent 3 years to translate the Maha Prajna. Xuanzang, the student monk who studied in India for 17 years. These people spent his lifetime in bringing the Buddha's philosophy to life, to civilization, to people, to sentient beings, so that they all know about the Buddha's teaching, so that they all get liberation and emancipation from samsara, from life and death. These are great translators, great adventurers, great educators, great practitioners of Buddhism, and great bodhisattvas. They spent their whole life in it. And 600 volumes, Mahaprajna. How did he translate it? He didn't translate it all by himself. He's the main editor. He trained 700 to 800 students for a number of years, selected by the imperial government, by the king, in the translation academy. They worked together. They translated Maha Prajna. Maha, you know what Maha means? Great. The great, the Maha Prajna, contains 600 volumes, millions of Chinese characters, by Xuanzang in the Tang Dynasty, the most venerable净燦法师in the Tang Dynasty, about 1,100 years ago. And there are, of course, 11 other independent translations of Prajna I talked about earlier. The time of translation dated back as far back as 179 AD in the Han Dynasty, about 1,800 years ago. The earlier Prajna Paramita literature dated back to 1,800 years ago about Prajna. I do not want to confuse you with the enormous magnitude of this Prajna literature. The Chinese over the centuries have done the most translations, containing millions of characters and translations performed by thousands of monks who were experts in Sanskrit and Chinese. So that's why we have this resourceful philosophy of the Buddha, because all these people did a lot of work. They spent their whole life into it. Not just the Chinese. In the past 200 years, I'll tell you later, there are Western people who spent their whole life in prajna. The British, the German, they spent their whole life in translation and studying it. Maybe that should be my next topic. Number 3 reason for the importance of prajna. I still have 5 minutes to go. Right now I'm still looking for the English translation of some of this prajna literature. I know some, for example, Edward Cairns, Professor Edward Cairns. You can check that in the internet. Edward Cairns translated Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines. Perfection of Wisdom is prajna. He translated he used the English words perfection of wisdom. He didn't use prajna because prajna, some people may not understand, it is not common English. So prajna to Edward Cairns is perfection of wisdom. Worldly wisdom is not perfect, you know. It geared towards the bad side. Sometimes it diverges into the vicious side of civilization, of human thinking, wisdom. But perfection of wisdom is perfect. It's the purest. So he translated perfection of wisdom in 8,000 lines. So there's 8,000 lines of the original Sanskrit translation, of Sanskrit, 8,000 lines. And also he translated perfection of wisdom in 25,000 lines. Edward Cairns is a British scholar. He's expert in Sanskrit and is professor of London University. And he spent his whole lifetime in translations of prajna literature from Sanskrit into English. He passed away in 1979. 1979, not too long ago, 28 years ago, 29 years ago, he passed away. He's a British who was born in London, but he is of mixed German and French ancestry. I think his mom is German and his dad is French, and they stay in London, and he was born in London. He spent his whole lifetime in prajna, and he translated direct from Sanskrit into English. You see the difference? I hope you see the difference. Here is a Westerner, the Chinese call him a Westerner, who didn't translate from Chinese. He found the original, authentic Sanskrit prajna and translated them. It's direct translation, not a second-hand translation. Maybe I should stop at this point, and I'll continue in the next time.